Today we're making a butternut squash soup with farro and kale, and then we have some crusty bread we're gonna put some Parmesan on and toast up in the oven. I have already pre-cut my butternut squash and roasted my garlic and my leek, and you can see I just sliced it in half. I left the seeds in here just to make it as simple as possible, drizzled some olive oil over it and placed it down, and then stabbed it with a fork about 6 to 7 times. It went in the oven at 375 for about 30 minutes. The first thing I'm gonna do is cut up my onion. We're gonna saute this in the pan until it becomes pretty translucent and starts to caramelize before we add our butternut squash and garlic and leek. Just gonna cut it in half and then slice it on the sides. And then cut it again, and then we'll just dice it a little bit smaller before we add it to our pot. The kale is gonna be the last thing we add to our soup, but we're gonna prep it before we start anything else, just to thoroughly clean it. We'll de-stem it. We'll hold it up at the tip and take down the sides and then go like that, just to have a clean, easy way to break it off. But just make sure you're really cleaning your kale very well, because a lot of times you can get like little buggies, especially like the fresher it is, if it's from farmer's market or organic. So you really wanna look through and thoroughly clean your kale. All right, we're adding olive oil to the bottom of our pan. Be pretty generous with that. And then I'm gonna take our onions and put them in and saute, and then we'll scoop out the seeds. I like to keep a bowl next to me as I'm doing this so I can just throw it all straight into here, and then we compost it later. So I'm gonna grab my onions. So before I add anything else, I really want these to saute and start to caramelize a little bit. So we're just gonna mix them around a little bit. I'll add some salt to it and let this cook before I move on to my leeks, garlic, and butternut squash. I roasted a whole thing of garlic with the butternut squash, added a little bit of olive oil, and just stuck it on the pan. And so now that it's cool, we're just gonna take it and smush it, similar to what we did before in the last soup recipe. It's kind of gross, but also amazing. So we're just gonna add this now to our garlic, or sorry, our onions. A little messy, but worth it. Okay, I'm gonna lower my heat now and just mix that all together. And now we're gonna take the butternut squash, and these little ones are honey nut squashes that we're gonna add with the butternut squash. So they're a little bit sweeter. And obviously these have been sitting out for a little bit, so they're very cool to touch. If they've just come out of the oven for you, wait at least a half an hour before you start handling the way I'm handling it. All right, I'm gonna take my roasted leek and slice it down the center and cut off just this end part. And then open it up, and we're just gonna remove this really soft part that's on the inside. And I'm gonna actually just take that off and cut off that end part, and then we'll just chop this up. Okay, and now I'm gonna put this back into our pot. Gonna add our leeks now, and then just mix it all together. We're not pureeing this like we have before with the squash soup. We're just kind of sauteing it, the roasted veggies with our onion, and at this point we're gonna add our broth. I'm gonna use 4 cups of chicken broth. If you wanna keep this vegetarian, you can obviously add veggie broth, but I like the extra protein, so we're gonna do chicken broth. Okay. And we're gonna let this cook for a little bit before we add our beans and our tomatoes and then our kale. I'm gonna add about a cup of crushed tomatoes to this, and then our farro. If you want to keep this gluten-free, you could do rice instead of farro, or you can just skip a grain altogether. Add 1 cup. So I did 1 cup of farro, and then I rinsed it with water and then drained it. And now we'll add this to our soup. And then we're gonna add some fresh thyme and pepper and a little bit more salt. And we're just gonna let this cook now until the farro is totally done. And at the very end, we'll add our white beans and our kale. All right, I'm gonna add a cup more of water. And our thyme stems, I'm gonna remove now because all the little thyme leaves have fallen off. So you can just pluck those right out, and then we'll add our beans. Give it a little mix. And as you're mixing it, you'll probably see more thyme leaves pop up, so we'll just remove those as you see them. And then the last thing we're gonna do is add our kale. Just gonna put our kale in there. Okay, so once our kale's in there, we're just gonna mix it around so it just wilts down into our soup. And then we'll just do some Parmesan cheese on top of this. Just get it really well mixed in there. And if you see larger pieces of the butternut squash, you can just kind of like push it down, kind of break it up a little bit. Oop, and I see another stem. But we want this soup to be a much heartier soup than the last ones we've made. The last soup we made was more of like a puree, a pumpkin puree, not a lot in it. This one, we have the farro, the white beans, the kale, the leeks. It's just gonna be a really yummy soup to have this fall. And we'll take our Parmesan and just add some to the top. And then we'll just let this sit at a low heat while we do our baguette. Okay, we're gonna take our ciabatta bread. You could use a baguette, a country loaf, whatever you have. And I'm gonna do some thick slices. Probably just half of this, because I know some of my kids will wanna use the bread to dip in their soup. And then we're just gonna cut it into big chunks. And I just turned my broiler on. So we're gonna broil this. And so once you have your chunks, you're just gonna put it right into a bowl, and then we'll add our Parmesan cheese and our olive oil. So now our bread's in here. We're gonna drizzle over olive oil. And you can really use your hands just to mix it all around. So we'll just get in there and kind of make sure each piece has some olive oil on it. And then we'll take, I'm just gonna use my zester and grate some of my Parmesan cheese on top. And we'll add this to our pan here, and then I'll do a little bit more cheese as well. Okay, and then we're just gonna pop it in the oven and broil it for a few minutes. Our soup is now done. I've left the bread on the side, and so people can either choose to put that on top of their soup or just eat it on the side. We have more Parmesan we can grate into our soup. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this and it keeps you cozy this fall.